This program is sponsored by I.S. Law Firm.
Welcome to Turkish American Hour. I'm Eray Tulun. Today we're back again with attorney Ismail Shahtakhtinski to talk more about immigration law. Mr. Shahtakhtinski is the founder and principal attorney of I.S. Law Firm. He advises individuals, families, and business owners on immigration matters, and he is licensed in Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and New York. He also speaks Russian, Turkish, and Azerbaijani. Again, welcome back, Ismail. Thanks for coming out today.
Thank you. It's good seeing you again.
So let's start off with a question that's important to many people that watch this, and that is, when someone is new to the United States, what are the biggest cultural shocks that can accidentally turn into immigration problems?
I would say the biggest cultural shock is communication in the United States. I mean, there is a difference between the way people communicate with each other in different cultures. You know, aside from handling immigration matters in general, we also help with business matters, establishing businesses in the United States, registering business corporations. A lot of times they have cultural shock on the business ethics, the style of communications, the way you conduct business in the United States versus in their home country.
Going into that, in our community, advice usually spreads very fast. You know, someone says something, someone finds out about something, and they just tell everybody. So what are the most common immigration rumors that you hear, and why are they dangerous? Something that, you know, you should have your ears open to, and just in case you hear it, you can be like, no.
I'll name few that come to my mind. May not be necessarily applicable to all immigration applications, all immigration procedures, but for example, using an interpreter. And even today, I had a preparation call with a client of mine who has interview coming up. He's fluent in English and he's saying, no, I'll bring an interpreter to the interview. And when I asked them why, they're saying, well, because I read and I heard from rumors that having an interpreter at the interview helps you think about your answers, process the question better. But maybe that may be true. But the other side of it is that the translation, you know, lost in translation, right? That's a popular saying. So a lot of tone, emotions, even the meaning of the words often get lost in the translation. So generally, you should not have an interpreter and translator for your immigration interviews, for any immigration application process, unless you don't feel comfortable in English at all. And you don't need to use any legal language in your communications during your immigration interviews. So you don't need use any complex legalese, any complex terminology. So that's why you don't need an interpreter. Again, unless you're absolutely uncomfortable speaking in English. So that's one misconception. That's one of the rumors that unfortunately heard many. The other rumor that I hear, doing it yourself, filing papers on your own, rumor that you can hire a paralegal or non-licensed attorney or someone who is not, a licensed attorney to handle the process for you. In the end, it actually hurts. It causes so many different problems. The third rumor I would say is that you can probably get by even if you tell a lie or hide information. I always tell my clients, look, you're dealing with the US federal government that probably has the most powerful intelligence, most powerful technologies to dig for the answers, to find the truth, or to reveal, where do you actually live. All right, so, some people want to use different addresses to indicate in their immigration applications or in immigration courts as if they live in one place, but they're actually living in a different place. So the rumor is that if you can just choose and use your friend's address, nobody will know. But that often is not true. The government will find out, and it will cause severe issues, consequences for the immigration benefits.
Okay. And kind of like on the topic of that, what are the top signs that you might be getting bad advice about immigration?
Well, number one, I mean, if somebody tells you to do something that you know that is illegal, to misrepresent or hide information in the forms, that's bad legal advice. You know, that's, again, a lot of times it looks innocent, it sounds innocent, but in the end, there are ways to get around lying. You don't need to lie to be able to. There are ways to get waivers. There are ways to present the information in the light most favorable to you, or present it in a way that it will not be considered a misrepresentation. It will not cause inadmissibility or denial. But definitely, if you get a bad advice, if you get advice saying, you know, don't put this information, otherwise you'll be denied, you should run. That, whether they're a lawyer or not, they're giving you bad advice.
You know, not everybody is an attorney, and not everybody like knows exactly where to look. So where to fact check, ways that they can fact check, and you know, what sources are trustworthy and which ones aren't, you know, kind of like going through that. Well, what's your advice there?
I think you're hinting at AI.
A little bit, just a tiny bit.
Because nowadays every fact check, everybody looks up in AI. And unfortunately, AI does hallucinate a lot. So the information, and you know, in our law firm, we have staff, we have 10, 11 employees, we have paralegals, and I always tell my employees that definitely use AI. If you don't use AI, you're way behind, and you know, we have to use AI. But you always have to verify, you have to fact check the AI, although you're doing, you know, fact checking information with AI, but then you also have to, and it never stops. So anything in nowadays, even if you go to a website, you Google, you find a link, you're reading an, you know, well-written article about something, always you have to fact check. And the only way you can fact check is look at different sources of the information, right? So if you're reading an article on one website, and you know, you can plug in that information from that article into AI and ask the AI to fact check it for you. And then once the AI fact checks, then prompt the AI to give you the source of the information that AI used. And you just have to analyze and research and review the information. You know, I am an immigration attorney, licensed attorney, but also you should fact check immigration attorneys too. I mean, we're not perfect, right? So getting a license, you know, becoming an immigration attorney doesn't mean you're perfect. Immigration attorneys make mistakes. So fact check what immigration attorneys tell you. So if you get an advice, legal advice, get a second advice. And you know, the chances are that both of them are not going to make the same mistake. So similarly here. So if you hear something about immigration procedures, about, you know, immigration myths, something that even it sounds like what you want to hear, that those are the ones actually you should fact check probably more.
Next, just getting a little bit more practical. What does daily life look like while a case is pending?
You mean daily life of the applicant?
Of the applicant, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the type of the case. I mean, many cases that you file in the United States, you can remain in the United States, you will be lawfully present. So, for example, if an applicant here is undocumented, right, or they had a status that got expired, now they are filing for immigration based on marriage, or their child, who's now 21, is sponsoring them for permanent residency. As soon as the application is lodged with the USCIS, they become lawfully present. They don't have a status yet, but they're lawfully present. So they can normally, you know, have the lawful presence. They shouldn't be afraid to be picked up by ICE. Nowadays, that's the big topic, right? So as soon as that's filed, you have the receipt confirming that your application is filed, what's called adjustment of status application. With that receipt, you can walk around, you can, you know, it's always advisable to have it in the pocket, and then you're lawfully present in the US. Similarly, for example, if somebody applies for a refugee status, for asylum status in the United States, then once it's filed, you're lawfully present in the US for the time while your application is pending. And during that lawful presence, you can also apply for a work permit after a certain time. With the adjustment of status application, you can file it at the same time. But it doesn't apply to every single case. So there are cases where a petition can be filed for you, but that petition by itself doesn't give you, the pendency of that petition doesn't give you a separate right to remain in the United States. So independent from that, you need to have a separate status. For example, a sibling sponsoring sibling, right? So for example, if I'm a US citizen, I'm sponsoring my sibling, I can file the petition. It will probably last around 16 years based on the backlogs of the priority dates. During that time, my sibling doesn't get the benefit of remaining in the United States during those 16. They can stay as long as they have other independent status other than waiting for that petition.
Okay, and then you touched on it a little bit, but I feel like a lot of people have the concerns of ICE and worries about that. You know, what can you say about on that? Like, what are ways that, you know, small ways to protect yourself?
I mean, you can protect yourself only to the extent that you can guess where, you know, you can guess what can happen to you. I mean, it's, you know, it kind of goes without saying that don't go near the border, right? Don't go to the cities that we know that are being, you know, raided by ICE. Carry with you, if you are, again, unless you're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, carry with you the documentation showing that you have lawful status in the United States. Just put it in your pocket, just like you have your ID with you. So carry it with you so that you can show it in case if needed. In fact, you can go to our website. We do have brochures in many languages, including in Turkish language, which specify what to do if ICE officer approaches you in the street, or what to do if ICE officer knocks your door. So what are your rights, what you can or what you cannot do. But the good idea is to be always prepared, to be on the lookout. But I also don't want people to panic. I don't want to, you know, distill fear in the immigrants' minds and to cause them not to do normal things they used to do, because it's very, very emotional, you know, about what is going on and the way it affects communities. You know, these ICE raids and all this news about ICE, masked men picking up people from the streets. I just don't want people to panic. It's gonna pass soon. It's not gonna last long.
Okay, perfect. I mean, good to reassure people on that. And then, you know, you talked a little bit about it, like living normally, work is a part of, you know, day-to-day life. What are the biggest work-related mistakes that can create long-term immigration issues? And what should someone never do just for now? Like, oh, I'll just work for a little bit now, you know, it won't be anything. Like, what should people avoid doing?
So, work-related, I think there is one of the most frequent issues is that not realizing what constitutes unauthorized employment. So the lines between, for example, volunteering and being, you know, working without authorization are very blurry. So, you know, sometimes students tell me, okay, I'm here on the student visa status and I'm not allowed to work, but can I work for free? Can I do internship, or can I work that, you know, do the job until and not get paid? And it always shocks them that actually it's worse. When I tell them that it's worse if you work for free, because you're still taking a job from a potential US worker, right? But if you do it even free of charge, you're hurting the US worker more because you're competing. So that employer is more motivated to hire this student rather than US worker, because that student is gonna work for free or cheap. So that's the essence of it, is that you should not do you should not do any work that would replace a US worker. That is unauthorized employment. Unless you have an employment authorization, unless you have the proper immigration status that does give you this authorization to work at this job. The easy rule of thumb is that, could this be done by someone who is paid? So if somebody tells you, okay, you're on F1 visa status, or let's say you're on H1B, you work in one place, but then you also want to volunteer for an organization. And the easy question to ask is this: should this have been paid job, what I'm doing? You know, if I'm showing up as a guest speaker in an event, probably that's not, most likely, and I'm sure it's not considered an employment, authorized employment. But if you are volunteering at a restaurant for an event to serve or to do something, that probably you're replacing. That's probably something will be considered as unauthorized employment, because you're replacing a potential U.S. worker who would be paid for doing that job.
Okay, that makes sense. And you know, you kind of flowed into it a little bit, but students are a huge topic for Turkish families. What are some social mistakes that students in particular make that are not illegal but still can, you know, create troubles, create pains in the future?
Let me reverse that question, where I would say that the students often, and related to work in the United States, they have a misunderstanding that you cannot own a business in the United States if you're a student. So there is this very frequent misunderstanding that if you open a business in the United States as a student, that will be considered a violation of your status. It's not. So anyone in the United States or outside the United States, with status, without status, or any status, can own business can register a business in the United States, own a business in the United States, hire employees, conduct their business as owners, but not work in the business, not to perform day-to-day life. So from the mistake standpoint, that's where the issue comes up, is that students register their business. A lot of students, you know, they graduate with high level of degree, high level of, you know, skills, knowledge, understanding, for example, in business, finance, any kind of sphere. And then they open a business in the United States, and then they make a mistake and they go and work for their business. Even something as simple as developing the website for your business. As the owner of the company, you cannot. You will have to hire a website. So if you're a student on a student visa, unless you have the work authorization, you can create a business, own the business, hire employees, you know, come up with ideas, share ideas, but you cannot do any kind of day-to-day work, any work that could have been done by someone you would hire. That is a big no, and then that would be a student status violation.
Okay, and like some other things that kind of go along with that, you know, cheating is a big thing that happens in schools. So like, and you know, dropping classes, registering for in-person versus online, you know, people always, like their friends, their peers might skip a class, things of that nature, you know, the social norms of like going to college here. You know, what are the do's and don'ts kind of on that end?
Well, you pretty much listed most of them. So don't cheat, don't fail in your classes. There is a certain level of grades. You have to take certain number of classes. I believe it's 12 credits per semester. Not online, it has to be in person. I mean, you always, here's my advice to you, to the listeners. Any kind of immigration process, whether it's student visa, student status, whether I should work or not, or can I work with authorization or can I not, finding or gathering all these answers, yes or no, and remembering them is very hard. You have to look at the reasoning behind it. So you have to look at the reasoning why this rule exists. As I explained, you know, the rule about whether you can do this work or not is all about protecting the U.S. workers, right? So with the students, you know, the failing your grades or cheating in the test or taking online courses, right? So the logic behind online courses versus in-person courses is that, meaning you have to take in-person courses, but you cannot take online courses and still qualify for a student visa and status to remain in the U.S. The logic behind that is that if you can do it online, then you can sit in Turkey and still take the same course, right? Why do you have to be here in the United States? And the same logic applies, for example, for investor visas. So sometimes, quite often, I have a businessman in a foreign country, let's say in Turkey, who wants to open a business in the US, and they want to apply for investor visa. And their question is, can I have that investor visa and still live in Turkey and then come here once in a while? the question comes in is that if you are qualifying for that E2 investor visa, you have to demonstrate that you're managing actively your business. But if you're spending 99% of the year in Turkey, how do you justify managing the business in the United States? And how do you justify why you have to be in the US to manage the business if you're successful in managing there? So you may lose the benefits of these different kind of visa statuses in the US if you can do it remotely, and if there is no justification for you to be physically in the US to be able to achieve the same goal.
Okay, so it's more of the intent behind it and kind of knowing that, correct?
That's right.
Okay, perfect. And then so last time we kind of did like the practical and then talking about some myths. So before we close, let's, again, talk about like simple plans and some, common myths that you would like to clear up. Let's do with like the rapid fire myths first, and tell us if it's true or false, and then short blurb on why it is true or false.
All right, let's do it.
Starting with, if I marry a U.S. citizen, I am automatically safe.
No, absolutely not. So marriage is just one step in that direction. Number one depends on the status you currently have. So if you entered the United States without inspection, meaning you cross the border, you may not be able to adjust status in the United States at all, even if you marry with a U.S. citizen. The second, marriage with the United States doesn't give you any immigration benefit. With a United States citizen, doesn't give you any immigration benefit unless you take action, meaning you properly prepare all of the forms, gather documents, file everything with the USCIS, and once you file it, that's when you are safe. That's when you, as long as you properly filed it, that's when you become lawfully present in the United States, and that's what. But just marriage with a U.S. citizen is not safe, and never enter into sham marriages. That's one myth that I didn't mention in the previous, and I regretted that in the previous segment. But that, the myth is that nobody will know. There are, you can file a bogus application, nobody will find out, oh, I know someone who did that in the past. I think it's appropriate to mention it at the time when we're talking about marriage with a U.S. citizen. Sham marriages get revealed, a lot of people get caught. It's just, the way it works is that those who get caught, they don't like sharing it with their friends and relatives. They're not gonna brag that, oh, I entered into fake marriage, I was caught, that's why I'm leaving the United States.
So, on the topic of social media, everybody uses it these days, and, wide variety of platforms going from Facebook, Instagram, X, and that's a very key part. I've heard, of course, that they're kind of checking more into social media, and what you're posting is really important to this process. Could you touch a little bit on that in particular?
They do, of course. It's very important to filter out the information that you would not want the US government or ICE to see, right? So even if it's in your private account. So from the information, not directly to me, but from what I've heard, is that individuals sometimes are stopped at the border upon entering into the US. Their phones are basically searched to the great extent, including even the CBP officers asking the entrants into the US, non-immigrant entrants, to give them the password so that they log into the social media accounts and go through your personal social media account. So be cognizant of it. You don't want, obviously, to mention things that may be misinterpreted as being un-American or against the United States in one way or another. Unfortunately, that's the reality today, is that you want to be careful. You have very little rights at the border when you enter the United States, and not giving them your password, not sharing your social media account with the CBP is not going to be an option, because they have a very wide discretion of not letting you into the United States. So be cognizant of it when you are posting on social media and you're planning to travel into the United States and apply for immigration benefits.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. And so next, if I have a clean record, I don't need to worry.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that's not true either, because now, for example, starting from October of last year, under the Trump administration, they changed the policy for naturalization applications. In the past, we did not have to affirmatively prove good moral character. I'm just giving one example. So when you apply for naturalization, you have to affirmatively prove that you have good moral character, even if you have nothing negative. In the past, if you had, let's say, some kind of arrest history, criminal history, then you had to prove positive to kind of overcome that presumption of bad moral character. But now, even with clean record, you still have to affirmatively prove good moral character by filing documents, affidavits, and evidence.
What would kind of look like you said filing documents, but what is it that kind of shows that moral character for someone that shouldn't be worrying for things?
Yeah, very good question and very relevant to nowadays. It would be different things for different, depending on the circumstance, for different applicants. But if somebody, if you're employed, then you would get letter from your employer how trustworthy, reliable, good employee you are. If you volunteered for any organization, for a church, mosque, synagogue, you would get letter from the community, from neighbors, maybe from school teachers of your children, how caring father or mother you are. So it may mean different things for different people depending on the circumstances, but yeah, those are examples.
And then finally, so for Turkish families that are planning on in the future moving to the U.S. and especially in 2026, what should they do first?
Consult, look into different options, plan ahead, strategize, and as we talked, fact check, and get second opinions.
Perfect. All right. Again, lovely to have you here again. And where can our viewers, find you, find more information about you, get in touch with you?
We are I.S. law firm, immigration law firm. I'm the founder of I.S. law firm. We have staff of different paralegals, attorneys of diverse backgrounds. Our law firm's website is islawfirm.com. We also have various social media pages. We have presence on YouTube where we post different videos, different blogs and vlogs. We have LinkedIn page. We have Facebook, Instagram, so you can follow us there. And you can also contact our office through our website. You can email us, give us a call, or reach us via WhatsApp, and we'll be happy to schedule a time and answer your questions and help you realize your American dream.
Thank you so much, and thank you again to our viewers for watching Turkish American Hour. Goodbye, and hoşça kalın.
Thank you. Hoşça kalın.